You're listening to ExtraTextual. This is a show where we talk about an idea, concept, theme, trend, and relate it to some kind of media like film, TV, video games, books, music, and hopefully discover something about ourselves or our culture along the way. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the show. This is Eli Steenlich, and with me is
Jeremy Holiday.
You may have not heard our voices for a little while because we have been slowing down a little bit with our busy schedules. And that's what we're going to blame it on.
Yep.
But we've got some exciting news to talk about that's coming along.
Yeah.
And with this sort of schedule thing that's coming up and wanting to provide great episodes to everybody, we've kind of rethought our format and want to do something a little more special with what we do. So we have a lot of fun having conversations about movies and TVs and books or whatever we're talking about, but we thought we would go in a little bit more unique way.
Even more extra-textual. Another layer. And we're going to have a little bit more of a storytelling aspect to our show. So we're going to really do some hand-picking of our guests and take some time to choose who we're going to have on. And they're going to tell some great stories around movies they've seen, something inspired by a movie they saw, some memory they have watching a movie, something special to them to tell some good stories. Because I think we're pretty big story fans. Jeremy recently participated in the local Moth live event and won for that evening. Oh gosh, Eli. Yes, I did.
So we're big fans of sort of oral storytelling and what that looks like and what it reveals about people and kind of the shared experience around those stories, I think. So that's something we want to bring to the podcast world and merge our sort of love of movies and storytelling, basically.
Also, And also, I've been listening to a number of other podcasts, in particular the Terrible Thanks for Asking podcast made by Nora McInerney up there in Minnesota, just across the way. And that sort of solidified some ideas that I'd had about podcasts and things that we'd been thinking about in our other podcast about breaking up what we do into seasons. Because we're not a television show. We don't have an external schedule about what needs to be a season and whatnot.
No rules, yeah.
But I notice with podcasts that I listen to that are generally not divided into seasons topically, like some of the true crime ones, they generally undergo an evolution in their identity at each of the season breaks. And it's usually, in my experience of listening to podcasts, it's always for the better. Yeah. With Terrible Thanks for Asking, she has a much better sense at the end of each season, going into the next season, what exactly it is she's doing, what exactly she cares about most, and sort of what unique element her podcast brings. And I think that's part of what we're doing here as well.
Yeah. So please feel free to spread the word that we're going to be doing something a little bit new, and it's something you're going to want to share with your friends and colleagues and whoever you talk to about podcasts, because I think it's going to offer something a little bit different than you've heard in other podcasts.
Yeah, and Stranger Things is coming up, so you can probably bet that one of our early episodes is going to be a story that involves us and our childhood and Stranger Things and a variety of other things.
And paranormal stuff. We've dealt a lot.
Yeah,
with that
totally.
in our
Lots of paranormal
lives.
stuff in my life.
That's the connection, right?
Yeah. Mainly Dungeons and Dragons.
right. Yeah. Cool. So that's we're really excited about that, and we're eager to tell you more as things develop. But watch out for that. It won't be too long of a break. We'll be back pretty soon with more episodes. So keep us subscribed so you know when that shows up.
Yeah, and Star Wars is coming up this winter. I am going to be watching that at the original Alamo Drafthouse, I believe, in Austin, Texas, with a good friend of mine.
Wow.
Whole family will be probably, or at least me and one or two of the kids. So I'll have a unique experience to share with you about that. I hope it's good.
Yeah,
we'll see.
And new
Rise of the Skywalker.
I know Star Wars TV show, The Mandalorian, will be coming out right before that in November.
Yeah, and the Ahsoka season of
Clone Wars, which I'm most excited about.
And Disney will have all of our money, all of the monies.
Or at least whatever it costs monthly for us to subscribe to whatever.
That's pretty reasonable, actually.
Yeah.
Cool. So we are, with our sort of last of this regular format of our series, of our podcast, we are going to do sort of a wrap-up of what we've just been watching recently. Some things, since we haven't been doing episodes quite as often, and we've done a couple like special episodes on certain topics. So we're just going to kind of take this chance to bring you some of the things that we've been enjoying recently and talking about. And don't worry, we'll still be kind of talking about some of that in our new format. I think we'll still be mentioning some things we've been watching and appreciating, along with some storytelling. So there's a few connections between what Jeremy and I have been watching, but I have maybe a little bit longer list of things I just want to toss out that I've really enjoyed. But a few of those connections, I think one we're really excited about is season 2 of Fleabag was released, I think this month or last month, I'm not even sure, pretty recently.
I watched it in like 3 days.
Yeah, I watched it pretty fast too.
I think it was probably 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So this month probably.
And I thought it was maybe even better than season 1. There was some really clever things, and just highlighted for me how sharp the writing is in this show, and just the dynamic of the back and forth between characters is really cool. And also, is it Andrew Scott who plays the priest?
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
I mean, I always loved him as Moriarty in Sherlock. And here he gets to be a little even more playful, sort of.
Yeah.
And
without needing to be sinister in the way that Moriarty was creepy.
Yeah. You know. I mean, I pretty much fell in love with him too.
He's fantastic. I mean, he reminded me a lot of I don't know the actor's name, but he played Vincent Van Gogh in the episode of Doctor Who and Vincent and the Doctor. I mean, it was like from 3 seconds on the screen. You know, he was just so adorable and sincere and honest and animated and energetic. I mean, you know, you don't doubt for a moment that he is this character in this place and time, and that has interests and motivations you can't quite fathom. I mean, it's just fabulous acting. I mean,
And who want him as your priest, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're. I had followed her Phoebe Waller-Bridge writing about the possibility of season 2, and people said you should do it. She's like, I don't have any more story to tell.
Story to tell,
but she, I read the article that when she started writing in production on it, she said, "Well, I think I sort of found the story." I mean, in a world of of Game of Thrones going to 8 billion seasons and ending with a whole lot of questionable things. I don't watch the show, mind you, but I hear about it all the time because that's what everybody talks about. There is some element of deep fantasticness that is someone who makes a show that is a season that is 6 episodes long.
Right. It's nice, yeah.
And a show that has 2 seasons. I don't don't know. I suspect she'll only make 2.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah.
And if she could make a third one, would be great. But I mean, part of what I think she realized, I don't know her, is that our main character has more of an arc to go through. And I had this experience to get ExtraTextual. I was at the Shitty Barn, which is this music venue in Spring Green, which is fabulous. And I was ordering a taco from these place that comes and does tacos before the shows. And I was shouting about something. Someone was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And these days, I was like, "I'm watching this new show, Fleabag."
Yeah,
people I don't know, and one person said, "Oh, what's that?" And then another person. There's so many people in the story.
Yeah.
The second person said to the first person, "Oh, it's a story about a woman who makes terrible choices, and she's a terrible person." And I was like, "That is not at all what the show is about." So I was like, I'm artistically offended at that comment. And so, but it made me sort of like, what would be my response to that? Like, how would I formulate what it is in a sentence? And I would say that only after watching the second season do you really get a sense that she's deeply troubled. And many people in her family are.
Right.
But because when that person said, the sense I had of our character in the first season is that she's always avoiding these really challenging feelings.
Right.
And I don't know exactly what her intentions were in the second season, but one of the conceits Lots of planes tonight. One of the conceits which I just could not get over because I thought it was so fantastic was like most of the times when she's with the priest, and she looks at us to talk to us, as if, as in a la Ferris Bueller, he somehow notices.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
In the way that she sort of disappears.
Right.
What it does is it puts our viewership as into the story. And you get to see that, at least what I would say, like that is her sort of stepping away and commenting internally sarcastically. Something, like it's a kind of behavior that you can watch and see in other people around you.
Right.
And to somehow mark him as being sensitive to that sort of emotional disconnection with the present was just fantastic. And because it had very intentional meaning in the story. It wasn't just like, oh, she talks like Ferris Bueller. Oh, he notices it because he's a priest and God and stuff. Right. No, I mean, it was just fabulous because it allows her to... He's the only person that kind of breaks into that space. So I think that's what allows her to make the choice she has to make, to be honest about the things that she feels.
Right.
Which ultimately, like in some sense, the first season is about her best friend's death.
And her coming to terms with it, sort of, and
yeah,
the reality of it, sort of.
Yeah. The second season is certainly more about older hurt, which is the death of her mother, and how that has influenced her life to that point. And I think it allows us to get like such a good shape of what that character is. So there's that. The other thing is like Phoebe Waller-Bridge is just such a funny writer. She's just, I mean, like...
And there's like weird little moments
yeah.
that make it...
I mean, so... Like, one of my favorite episodes in terms of humor is the one where, I think it's the second or third, when she's, like, helping her sister give the Women in Business Award.
Yeah.
And, like, when she picked it up and immediately dropped it, I was like, it was, like, almost Monty Python level funny.
Right. Right after her sister was like, don't touch it, don't pick it up.
Right. And it was like,
of course I'm not going to...
Because the skill, I think, of all of those great, I mean, among it, like, the great Monty Python sketches is timing. Yeah. It's like, it's something, like, the point from when someone sets it up to the point that you have the payoff, and I was like, it's so, I mean, like, it's not like laugh out loud funny, because that would cheapen, like, the beauty of that comedic moment.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I think in general, like, that unique timing is really what makes the show. Like, I think it was...
I had a miscarriage.
The second or third episode where she goes to see, like, a therapist. Yeah. And just, like, that quick interaction back and forth and her talking to us, the audience, kind of breaking that third wall was, like, so quick and fast. That was just so well acted and well written. Yeah. That was unbelievable. And I think those moments, too, like you said, when we get the priest character recognizing that she goes somewhere when she does that... Like, that also calls to attention. When she's with the therapist, she kind of goes through and is like, well, what's going on? And she, like, very openly says, like...
I'm really good at this.
Yeah, like, I'm really good. She just, like, goes through and is like, these are things wrong with me. And so, but it's, like, her coping mechanism. Yeah. Like, she's smart enough to know those things, but by acknowledging it so directly, she doesn't have to deal with it. You know, like, it's a very, like, multi-level thing going on. And I thought that was, like, super smart. And I think it also does use the medium so well that we use that trope of, like, talking to the audience, these asides that you've seen before, but then uses it to actually speak to her character and who she is and how people operate. And I don't know what you think about... We spoil everything here, so... the end of Fleabag, she sort of seems to, like, run away from... Like, she's sort of looking at... Yeah, and she, like, runs away, like, why are you following me? But I think there's some really cool things going on there. Because for a while, I didn't know what we were supposed to think about her looking at the camera now, you know? Who are we as the audience? Is she sort of, like, really have some mental issues? that she's like hearing voices and that's supposed to be us or something like that. But I think it's more just about her internal sort of psyche. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. The other thing too, in listening to one particular episode of Terrible Thanks for Asking, there were a contrast of things in the show. So there was someone telling what Norm McInerney would call like a traditional Terrible Thanks for Asking story, a story in which like something terrible happens and no one really understands and you're suffering by yourself. And you still have to do your whole regular life, right? But it was, I think it was like a special one for like a holiday. And there's one, normal one, and then there was like two comedians telling sort of stories. And I realized, I was like, oh, like that's what a lot of what our culture does to talk about tragedies. They turn it into really funny things, and we're like, ha ha, chuckle, chuckle.
Yeah.
And what I've appreciated about her show, if you're out there listening, Nora, and you want to like talk sometime, we could totally do a combo show. Anyway,
tell a story about a movie, maybe.
Yeah, made you sad. What I like about her show is the way in which it is different and honest. And I think part of what happens in Fleabag and part of what she retreats from is like talking to us, or you know, or like the general, like, who are we? Are we like, were the audience were people who on social media were Twitter watchers? Like we're the general audience that exists in the world of social media. She has turned her life into one that's quirky and funny and silly. And, oh my God, wow, for her audience. But and she's totally honest about exactly what's wrong with her, except that it's not even really honest. Like, and I think that there's some kind of like looking at the contrast between like a traditional Terrible Thanks for Asking episode and someone telling a comedic interpretation of a terrible thing that happened in their life. There's no room for any emotion in a comedic telling of a story, except for like it has sometimes a cathartic effect, but it's not, for me, like as an orphan in the world, it's not educational. I can't learn oftentimes from a comedic interpretation of a tragic event in the past as much as I can from an honest telling of how something is and how you feel about it. Because I often find that in comedy, with a few exceptions,
So I think you're saying like Fleabag sort of acknowledges both sides. Like it acknowledges that like, hey, I'm trying to turn this into comedy to not deal with it, sort of, but I also have to face that.
And that there is something real beyond this.
And I think there's other movies and shows that I would say do this, but this does it better.
Yeah.
In that you're sort of like laughing at it, and then suddenly you're like, oh crap, that was just like pretty honest. And like, oh, now I'm kind of tearing up a little bit.
Right.
And I was just... we were just making fun of this, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I think one insight... I mean, there were like insightful moments without getting cheesy, but I think her father at one point at the wedding towards the end says something about like, I think you actually, does he say like feel the most or like love the most of all of us?
Yeah.
And I thought that was sort of a good thesis of what they were trying to portray. Is like she shields it or like misdirects it a lot, but it's because she feels so strongly or is trying to.
Right, which is exactly how I would have characterized her. Honestly speaking about things in a world that she doesn't deny it, but in a world in which everyone else denies it. There's a couple other highlights that I have to mention. One of which is that it totally caught me off guard in the wedding when the mother-in-law is introducing their father to someone and she doesn't know his name. He doesn't have a name. Like, very few of these characters, because if you look in the credits, very few of these characters have names, right? And I assume that our main character is, I mean, like, I know that Phoebe Waller-Bridge is titled in there as Fleabag. I just call her the main character of the show. The show is called Fleabag. I get it. But it's, like, just like the anal sex man or the, like, hot misogynist. Like, they're roles. I don't think her name isn't Fleabag, right? Right. And I think it's a bit of irony in her, her telling us the story through the show and also calling herself that. It's a bit of self-deprecation to sort of cover the opposite. I mean, so that moment was like fabulous. I was like, oh, what is his name? She doesn't know. Like, I don't know. He's never called his own name. Yeah. And it was all, and because she's such a great, terrible character.
Right.
The other part that I like is, again, in the episode with the Women in Business Award, when she's like trying to get the golden statue woman back, which is like, I couldn't have thought anything better. Anyway, and then she's like, is this story like long and interesting? And like, so they go to a bar. One of the things that she says is, people is all we have, which I think is one of those things that I think about as I get older. Not like I'm super old or anything, but the true value in things is people. I was just, talking before we started recording about some memorabilia that I had gotten from my older brother over the weekend. I'm actually holding here a ruler called the Chem Rule, which I believe belonged to my great-grandmother, who was quite an academic. It has, on one side, it has, 39, it's a 40 millimeter ruler, and the other, it has a list of periodic table of elements. My kids find them fabulously entertaining. And I also have my mom's old original Viewmaster from like the 70s, which my kids find really fun and entertaining. And those items in and of themselves didn't have a whole lot of value to me. They're some manner of keepsake. But being able to share them with someone else and have them, enjoy them is sort of their true value. I also think too, just thinking of other things, some of David Brooks's most recent writing as well. There's some cultural lies we tell ourselves, like that professional achievement will bring happiness,
right?
And whatnot. And I think that part of what Ms. Waller-Bridge is talking about in the show is that there's a different world, and I wouldn't say. I read too much into it. I would say, in some sense, she's taking aim at us as the social media audience, if we play some of that role, to say that, like, there's a level of substance in the world that matters, and it mainly has to do with people. And they really bring us our greatest value.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, her sitting down for a drink with that businesswoman. Who I think I think there was a few connections she found. The priest is one who is kind of like a kindred spirit. And then this woman who, is sort of, she sees as basically like an older version of herself, possibly. In some, as far as like their view of the world, sort of. And it kind of took someone more mature in life to kind of tell her, like, like we try to blow off whatever these things are important, but like you said, it is like ultimately the people that are important. And I think that's what the message we get with sort of her sister and stuff too. Her whole family, but that however much they try to play off that they don't care that much. And I think it is interesting that through that whole thing, at least in the relationship with her sister, she is shown as like, I do care about my sister. It's her that like doesn't really let me let me in or let me care for her or be there for her. So she's not like the straightforward horrible character that I think some people might misinterpret her as.
One person.
No, but I think that would be easy to call out. And I think it's interesting, we see her in her cafe where she has to like keep convincing people like, no, it's going really well. Like it's actually successful.
It is going really well.
Yeah. And like you think she has like this, what is it, like Chatty Wednesday or whatever?
Wednesdays, yeah.
And it's like she seems to legitimately like enjoy this and her regulars and stuff. And it's like, it's good. Like she's found a place where she settled into that. So I think those are nice touches to kind of show like she's not in the same place that she was last season. It's like a lot of people that don't believe that she's not, sort of. But overall, this show once again sort of snuck up on me and made me sort of love it. Again,
I think probably what I would say is her most towering achievement is being able to create a second season for a very innovative show that uses most of the same structure as the original and tells a new and interesting story all along the way. There's just an element of, people, because I know about everything.
I know.
Like an artist, I think, needs to know what their skill set is. Like if you're a short story writer, don't write a novel. Right. And if you're a novel writer, like maybe short stories aren't your thing. Right? You got to know what your thing is. And I think she is great at telling stories that progress in a direction and don't repeat themselves. And having watched, there's like, we live in the golden age of streaming of television. Yeah. There's a refreshing experience for me as a viewer to have a person go through a story arc that is not repetitive. Certainly she comes back to certain issues, but every time she comes back, she has a new relationship with it, and she's progressing in a direction. The story is progressing. It's not like, oh, these people are always this way, which I think happens when you create characters and put them in a space. The same way, like in like Lord of the Rings, people get really fixated on the world. The world is awesome, but the world exists to tell a story. Yeah, and the story is ultimately what is most interesting to me. So,
nice. Yeah, and I'm excited for, apparently she's doing some tweaking of the new James Bond script.
Yeah.
And I think she made some statement about, like, we can't just portray women the same way in James Bond films anymore. Yeah. And she's like, we're not going to do that. So I'm excited to see what she sort of adds to it, which I'm guessing also a little bit of humor. But so that'd be cool. I'm excited to see what she does next. Another sort of point of connection for us would be Detective Pikachu.
Pikachu.
The Pokemon movie. Which, I don't know how I felt about it going in, but the trailers actually looked pretty good. I'm not like a huge Pokemon person. Apparently I knew more of the Pokemon than I thought I did going into it. Well, it was like, oh yeah, that's whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know a lot either, but like, it was like the classics.
Yeah. I mean, it did fit into, I think, for me and you, as we may have talked about, it's sort of neo-noirish.
It's not sort of. I mean, it is like, absolutely.
It looked like it could be set in, Blade Runner world.
Yeah,
I mean, the city.
Yeah, or certainly like, what's it, Blade Runner 2099? What's the new one?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly like a, like that, or like the world of Fifth Element, or the sort of like
those things. Which they didn't have to do, which is a nice touch.
Yeah, kind of a noir. I mean, like the son of a detective is missing. This is like classic setup, and some like guy with a detective hat comes in who's lost his memory. And I'm a sucker for that. It's like murder mystery plus like puzzle film plus double cross, and there were like a lot. There's like 3 or 4 double crosses in there.
Plus, I love the integration of the world of just seeing it, that they coexist with these Pokemon, and they handled that really well. It's just fun to see like in those big city shots, like how the Pokemon are integrated. Yeah. The Snorlax is like sleeping in the middle of the street, but they just gotta like deal with it. Yeah. Like traffic controllers and stuff. So I think all those things were handled really well. It'd be fun to like rewatch to catch those different moments. And I mean the way like they used the mime to interrogate the mime was brilliant. Yeah. And the I'm trying to remember the duck one. What's it called? Psyduck. Yeah, was really funny too. They just kept commenting like, "Why are we going in these tense situations when this one gets really nervous? It's going to explode." So a great thought behind, I think, some of those moments. That's
funny, I mean, this is totally inappropriate, but not. It reminded me of like the Mortal Kombat movie, which I thought. I mean, when I watched it as a kid, I thought it was great.
It's pretty great, good,
and certainly like mainly because like the signature elements of our characters all get worked in, including like the fireball, and everything. Yeah. But in a story that sort of in which they make sense. It's not like Psyduck is like doing his attack all the time. It's like they're all. Their abilities are special, and they're special in the game, and they're special in the world, and it seemed to capture the same reverence for the uniqueness of the characters that they did in the Mortal Kombat film. And also everything seemed really motivated. Like all the characters did things of a particular way that just seemed interesting, and I liked the. It was like easier for my 10-year-old and harder for my 7-year-old to track all the different things that happened with Mewtwo and whatnot. But I also like that Mewtwo was good.
Right. Ultimately, it was actually
which is a classic noir staple.
Like
I mean, you know, and I think it's sort of like in like the adult noir, like the presumed good person becomes evil, right? So I think in the kid noir, like the presumed evil thing becomes good. Yeah, I mean, I just have a love for like the most powerful thing in the world, like generally being benevolent.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, I would say maybe for a kids' film, that ending becomes a little too complicated with like taking over the minds and stuff like that was like a little bit much.
It also wasn't super clear why they physically become one thing.
Yeah, right.
I was like, that didn't happen in the end. I don't know, but
it was a little crazy, but
it was a crisis, you know.
But ultimately, it was
my 7-year-old's like, yeah, they saved him.
They saved him.
Like, I'm like,
that's what I got from it.
The Pokemon, I'm like, great.
Yeah, it wraps itself up really nicely. Like resets everything a little more nicely than is probably possible. But yeah, I think my 10-year-old and I had a lot of fun with it, and he's not like a super Pokemon fan either, but is familiar with it enough. Has played it some. So I think all of those elements come together to be really great. And like, it's interesting that you brought up Mortal Kombat, because I think kind of famously there hasn't been good video game adaptations into film.
Yeah.
But like, it maybe hasn't aged well, but at the time, like I said, Mortal Kombat was super fun.
It's
and
fabulous.
Good and great, and I think this is gonna hold up pretty well, or right now is pretty good translation of sort of a video game.
Yeah, and I mean, from the research that I've done on it, I mean, like, it's based on the game Detective Pikachu. It's not just like a
which I didn't really know about.
Yeah, no, I didn't, and I hadn't heard about it either. Because I mean, I know that like if you look at any list of like all Pokemon games, which I have before, it shows up, and I was like, I haven't heard of it, never played it, don't know anyone who played it, but I think they had a good, you know, like it's a lot of the other general Pokemon video games, at least, it's like, you know, you run around, go through the tall grass, get your Pokemon, do the thing, research, you know, and it's the same kind of story, which is not terribly interesting in and of itself if there isn't like Pokemon involved. But this story, I mean, it could be Pokemon or anything else. I mean, it also reminded me a lot of Zootopia. The same way in which there's like someone is trying to disrupt the unity of a place by making these, you know, these civilized beings seem more feral.
That's true.
Which I think is, you know, it echoes like Peter Brown's children's literature work, in which like wildness is contrasted with modernity, and trying to find a way in which, you know, like the natural can exist in the same world as the modern, and it, you know, it'd be recognized.
And they didn't totally try to deny it, but I think they did sort of work around the problem of like this weird capturing these Pokemon in these balls and making them battle. Doesn't seem great when you actually think about it. And so they addressed it enough and then created a environment where that doesn't happen very much.
Exactly. And so, and we, I mean, you know, again, like my experience of it was shaped by the things that were shown before it. We at Flix where we saw it, and they showed the first time that Pikachu appears in the old Pokemon animated show. Which I think might have been the first episode. Anyway, and so Ash, the head trainer, like tries to put him in a Pokeball, and he like won't do it. He like throws the Pokeball at him, and Pikachu just throws it back. and Ash's mom says, "Oh, look, he's playing catch," and he's like, "Ah," which I just think sort of sets up the Pikachu character and other Pokemon as well. Is like that there's that, you know, it's not just about getting them all and then, you know, having them battle. And I did like that, unlike the general TV shows, that like the battling was, because there was some Pokemon battles, battles,
and there was like an underground battle.
I mean, it was like, you know, what should I use? You know, like Ash said that, you know, like whatever, shock tackle or whatever.
This move,
which is clearly, you know, a nice homage to that sort of element of what being a Pokemon trainer is all about, commanding a Pokemon. But it also just seemed integrated into the rest of the story.
Very natural,
and again, in the same way that Mortal Kombat integrated all these moves that we do in this game, but also like made them motivated and part of a larger narrative.
Right. That reminds me of one thing I want to bring up briefly is the new season of Black Mirror. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch it. But there's only 3 episodes, but the first episode is sort of this play on Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter a little bit, where these two guys, you know, let's say early 20s,
were roommates and they like would love playing like this fighting game similar to that called Striking Vipers, which is the name of the episode. And then we cut ahead to now the one roommate is married and settling into suburban life with kids. And then now there's this new sort of very realistic like VR version where you can go in and it feels like you're the real person. And so his buddy kind of shows back up again and is like, you know, late at night they're like, hey, oh, you're online. Let's play this new like VR version that's very realistic. And anyways, you should probably check it out. But it turns into one is a female character in the game and one is a male. And they end up sort of hooking up in the game. And it becomes very realistic. And so they sort of like end up doing this and they're kind of like dealing with like, well, I don't really into this otherwise. And so overall my comments would be, I don't think the episode deals with what you might think that brings up about sexuality and the modern world and different ways that people think, and ends up a little more traditional in how it views it. Because at one point they're kind of like, well, we should see if we're gay. And then they're like, oh, we're definitely not gay. We're like, we're not into each other in real life. But it's just kind of like dismisses some of these things instead of like exploring them a little bit more. But I thought it was a really unique, it's like a good setup, I guess, for some of this. But I think ultimately this kind of, I don't know. There's a new Twilight Zone series, which I've also been watching from Jordan Peele.
Good.
And some of it's pretty good. I think I always kind of am a sucker for, I think, those short form sort of stories that have like these twists, which I think Black Mirror kind of falls into.
Yeah.
And I think the new Twilight Zone can't avoid being about technology a lot these days. And that's kind of Black Mirror's thing. Yeah. So I would say there's still a difference, but I think the newer seasons of Black Mirror, especially since it's switched to Netflix, has gotten a lot of flack for maybe not being as good. And I won't say that you can't judge it the same way. You can't critique it as strongly as other things, but I think it's doing so much to bring out these topics that are innovative and that we don't think about. Yeah. That I'm not saying it's beyond critique, but I think people are a little bit too hard on them sometimes.
Right. I mean,
like, it's really hard to nail those landings, which I think is usually like shades our understanding of like, well, did I like that episode? It's like, well, the ending. But I think sometimes I realize it's more like, well, yeah, but the journey was really interesting. Yeah. And the ideas it brought up is way better than what I watch in other shows, which are really simplistic. And it usually goes for it. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's too dark, but like, that's
like
what
the first episode.
Like the first episode, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, like my wife and I, my wife's been reading some, like journeying some into classic sci-fi. Either, you know, mostly book on tape, like audiobook as she drives to work. But I mean, like classic sci-fi has a very, at least in my mind, even has a very unique style, and like, the characters are flat. It's not particularly, there's not a story that's all that compelling, though there may be a little bit there. Yeah. But it's mainly about like this idea or a concept.
Right.
And I think like, you know, that's what sort of Black Mirror does. I would say like the first, I mean, there are some like episodes in the first 1, 2, 3 seasons. I mean, that are like, really excellent, yeah. I mean, they will, especially like the Christmas one. I mean, that's like one of the greatest hours of storytelling. I've ever seen. You know, I mean, it's amazing. You know, and like San Junipero. I mean, a couple of the other ones as well. They're like, you know, I mean, it's almost again like some multi-layered Monty Python sketches, but in a different way that you're like, and we're only 35 minutes in, and there's another layer to the story and another layer to the story. Yeah, you know, and again, like it's just hard, I think, to continually make. Right. Something that's as innovative to the world as your first couple things. Because then, because, you know, like making episode 2, 3, 4 of Black Mirror, it's in a world in which it doesn't exist. But then, like, you're season 4, and you're writing a season of Black Mirror in a world in which Black Mirror already exists. Yeah. So, like, you know, and I think that, like, you just can't, I think it's unreasonable to expect the same, like, level of innovation in every iteration of it. Yep. But, I mean... Yeah.
Yeah, and in an anthology series like that, basically you are creating a new series in every episode, a new world, and that's really difficult. Yeah. So I think sometimes people forget about all that work to go into it as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to linger 1 minute. I haven't seen the episode Striking Vipers.
Yeah.
I just spent 3 days playing Pathfinder at the Origins game convention in Columbus, Ohio. Had a great time. It was the first time I'd ever played Pathfinder Society stuff. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. But Pathfinder is like a tabletop role-playing game similar to Dungeons & Dragons, which was created in or about when Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 came out, which a lot of people didn't like, and folks who grew up playing it were like, this is too terrible, and created Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is... the Pathfinder Society is like an organized play element of it. So like there are like hundreds of modules, and there's protocol for having your character and playing through various scenarios. They're all fabulous, and I've never seen anything like it. It's super fun. But one of the things that I noticed, which is something I've noticed in a lot of the other gaming communities that I'm a part of, whether it's tabletop wargaming or other miniature games or role-playing, is that a character portraying themselves either in like a person portraying themselves as the character in a place or going through a story, like it is a mode of self-expression. And digressing here a great deal, but in like this game that I play called Warhammer 40K, where you can have various armies that fight each other, and there are many, many, many choices, and you paint your miniatures and push them around the table one to one another. I've had many conversations with people, lengthy, deep conversations about why they play, like, why do you play orcs, or why do you play this Eldar, like, why do you play these particular races? And it was after, years and years of that I realized that, these are an essential mode of self-definition and self-expression for a lot of people involved, including myself. Like, why do I always play the good guys? Like, that's who I want to be,
Right.
And I find that to talk, like, I've always been offended by the notion of escapism, which is simplistic. Because I think, but what I sort of saw, it's simplistic, and it doesn't capture what I think exists in a modern world where you can have people who interact with each other through a mitigated medium, whether it be a online, massively online game, or like a just regular sort of online game, or even through like these organized play things, the Pathfinder Society, or other sorts of ways in which people can get together and interact with one another through another medium. It allows a kind of self-expression that we generally discount. Like, so, I haven't seen Striking Vipers, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that, like, well, I just do that virtually, or I don't know how they talk about it, but I think it is as essential, like both of those elements, who the person is outside of the mitigated virtual space or fantastical space, and the person that is inside of it, they are one of the same person. And playing in a video game or in a role-playing setting and having that person or other person be in that space, they're not escaping from their other person. It is just another aspect of their self-expression. And I think about it too, like when even with work we do as artists or filmmakers, or when I play on a rugby team. There are people that have their own identities, but they also have another identity on this rugby team that I play on, right? And both of those identities are essential to that person. Some individual person may like one of them more than the other, or may feel that they are able to express themselves better on the rugby field or other places. And I think that there are clearly a hierarchy of socially acceptable ways of redefining or renegotiating your identity. And like being part of a team or a community, or there's various ways that are like, that's great. But if it comes to games or gaming, or even some level of art creation, it's like, it's just looked down upon. Those of us, Eli, that grew up struggling, in our own basements, creating worlds and killing vampires, in our there, quiet in the dusky rooms of our childhood homes, have always, settled for the fact that generally what we do is considered like silly and pointless and dumb, and we're all just a bunch of losers. the world is now run by us, or at least many part of us.
Right.
And I think that people have been realizing, like the episodes in Freaks and Geeks, if you haven't seen it, where they play D&D together, that it is a kind of playful self-expression that is very deeply valuable. And if I look at, for example, when I was at Origins in Columbus, when I look across at this group of people, like the convention happens every year during Columbus Pride, vast majority of the convention goers had like ally tags on their convention things. There were a lot of a variety of LGBT folks, a bunch of trans folks, a whole, a very accepting community of a lot of people. And there was a lot more variety of people and stuff than I see in various areas, not all areas, than I see in other places. And it's generally can be a very accepting community. Certainly a lot more males than females, but there's a variety. But there is a lot of acceptance inside of bounds. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's what the Striking Vipers episode was trying to get at.
Yeah.
That we can have this virtual aspect of our lives, maybe as we continue into the future, that can still be a representation of who we are, even though it's not something we have traditionally seen, in the past, but can still be us, but maybe didn't handle it in the best way. But it was so I think ultimately things that are reaching for that to say those kind of things are still interesting in of themselves.
Absolutely.
But acknowledge that maybe it doesn't always pull that off. And speaking of, I think I've been rewatching season 2 of Stranger Things.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of it. Rewatching it is that the way that they frame their very strange experience that's happening to them is through D&D, right?
Yeah.
That they try to make sense of these supernatural things happening because of this game they played, which isn't, a normal experience we have. But it still helps us understand who are the enemies and what are these unusual things happening to us, unexpected things in life. And it comes back to sort of what we're talking about, that people are important.
Yeah.
And so it still creates this sort of team feeling that connects to these kids, maybe outside of other people get that in sports or whatever it might be, that team aspect. But I think that is really unique.
And I think the team aspect that we're talking about for me is not so much being part of a team, but having a unique space in a team, right? Having an identity which is valued and integral, as opposed to extraneous.
Yeah, and I think the second season does illustrate that well. We get introduction of Mad Max, the new female character,
the Zoomer.
Yeah, who has trouble sort of fitting into this new group and finding her place. And a lot of it has to do with them not wanting, some of the group not wanting her to be in that role.
They don't believe in Zoomers.
Yeah. And, but I think this show is so fun. And I know we did an episode on season 2 and season 1, but I've been trying to think, I guess, I don't really revisit, especially TV shows, honestly. That's just me. I don't really feel the need to rewatch a season of something very much. Maybe it's just a big investment too. And I don't rewatch a ton of films either, unless they're really my favorites. But I wanted to revisit this, and we've talked about on here, that's a period that we grew up in. It's very nostalgic to us. We watched a lot of the movies that it's based on and sort of inspired by. And we've talked about how it kind of does its own thing, but I kind of wanted to rewatch and say, well, do I like it because of only this nostalgic factor, or is there something more? And I think it is just a well-made show, and it's not maybe everybody's cup of tea. I mean, it's very popular, but I think it's also just really well-made, well-written, well-structured, and fun, and a fun experience overall. So, and I also bring this up too because I think, so Netflix in particular has really been cranking out original content, right? Throwing it out there, we don't care if you're paying attention or not, it's going to be there, all this new content.
but as I go through it, I'm like, I've checked out quite a few of these things that they look exciting at first, but ultimately they feel pretty empty. So I come back to like, well, let's say something like HBO, where they don't release a ton of things, but usually they are pretty quality. And so I think there is something that I'm falling back to in this sort of new streaming world, that maybe a little more traditional approach of like, let's make sure there's quality writing and production behind this, or maybe not just like slick production to make it look fancy, but it's kind of empty ultimately. It is important. So like, for example, yes, True Detective Season 3, I really enjoyed. It was actually pretty bold to put it out ultimately. I don't think it like met a lot of people's expectations of what it was supposed to be. I've been watching Chernobyl. Haven't finished it yet, but on HBO, which apparently is one of the highest rated shows in a long time. But I think, again, they are taking the time to say, we're going to choose these projects wisely. We're going to really invest in them and make sure there's sort of a lot of love put into them. And Netflix, I feel like, is very much more of a hit or miss sort of feeling. And Stranger Things ultimately is one of the ones that really does warrant, I think, that affection that a lot of people have for it. And I'm looking forward to season 3 somewhere.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you just said about stuff. I mean, I think Stranger Things is a fabulous show. I think that it was evident from the very beginning that it was a fabulous show. I mean, the thing that I think of is another thing that we started talking about too before we started recording is I started playing this new video game recently. It's called The Way. It's sort of like a side-scrolling puzzle game with a little bit of parkour in there. It's based, it's 8-bit in style. It's based primarily off of a game called Flashback, which I played as a kid. It was just super hard when I played it. But in Flashback, you sort of wake up on this exotic island and you have to work your way through and go through these puzzles, and slowly you get your memory back and discover who you are, where you ended up there. And in The Way, I mean, Eli and I watched the trailer for it. It's like this, you guys in a trench coat in this graveyard, and it sounds like the music by Angela, so it feels like it's the beginning of Blade Runner, and then and it's just this amazingly sort of well done thing, and also has, I think most things that are mysteries have this sort of noir quality. I think there's going to be a twist in it later. But it's a genre, right? I mean, and it is a genre defined by a particular game. There have been many different things in this genre. I mean, you could call it the flashback genre, if you will. And I think that. And I think, honestly, like, if you look back historically, at least in terms of, like, literature, you'll find that oftentimes a new kind of story or method of storytelling will define something. Other things will then follow it. And we'll often call it, it's a more generic thing. Like, this is a particular kind of novel. This is the travel novel, but it's like, really, it's based off of so-and-so's book. Like, it's based off Moby Dick, or, like, it's based off of, this Adventures in Africa, or something like that. And so I think that Stranger Things is a genre piece. It is an 80s film, or like a neo 80s film. I don't know what you call it. But it like what it is, its genre is almost irrelevant to its quality. And I think that there are other, it's like, what do I say? It feels like, and I haven't thought about this before, so pardon my thing on the spot, but it almost feels like Stranger Things is like an evolution of parody, where you have these stories which are like, like everything Will Ferrell's in, or like Not Another Teen Movie, or all these things that are making fun of genre films. It seems like Stranger Things is that, just like, after having decades of that, you just turn the corner and say, okay, we're going to make an 80s film, but it's going to be fucking awesome. Right. because I think for a lot of time, and still in talking to other people, they don't know exactly what to do with it. Mm-hmm. And I think it is interesting and innovative in the way that it uses things, mm-hmm. but in some sense, it's like. And I don't. This is not meant pejoratively, but like it could be a pirate film or it could be a robot film. Like the kind of genre it is doesn't really matter mm-hmm. much, except that like it being an '80s film like Dungeons and Dragons is an essential part of it, and the time period mm-hmm. is essential to it. But mm-hmm. It's almost irrelevant to what makes it good, which is good writing, good structure, good action, and it uses mm-hmm. all the elements of the genre to tell a really exciting story while still being playful.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which is something which is why I think if my theory is correct, it comes ultimately out of the same kind of thought process that these sort of genre-based parodies come out of.
Right.
Like I was always fascinated, for example, that like libertarians were generally conservative. Like, I didn't think you were in that particular genre, but it's a kind of philosophy that develops by pushing an argument in a particular path for a long time. And I think that's sort of what happens with Stranger Things. It's just fantastic. I can't wait until I'm able to like watch it with my oldest son. Yeah, because I think he'll find it so exciting. And fascinating.
Another talking about sort of like playing into a specific genre or style. Something I think that hasn't gotten enough attention is this Amazon series called Homecoming.
Yeah.
Which is based on a podcast, actually, and is also by the same creator as Mr. Robot, which you may have heard me express my love for in the past. Yeah. Made by Sam Esmail. But it is sort of like a paranoid thriller throwback to like the 70s sort of mm-hmm.
Like
very bare bones, a lot of like long takes, and it does sort of like the zoom in sort of thing.
The slow zoom?
Yeah, like the slow zoom to create sort of tension and stuff. But they're only half an hour episodes. So it's kind of this fun thing of like, it's kind of like a slow drama, but then like you're like, oh, that's over. And there's like a cliffhanger sort of at the end of every episode. So it's sort of like a fun, like, normally you're like sitting back to watch an hour-long drama here, and then it's like, oh, it's over. Okay. And so there's a lot of fun things like that. Julia Roberts is actually in it and playing mostly dramatic role. So it's kind of fun to see her doing something a little bit different. Yeah. But I just really enjoyed it. There's a great thing it does like at the end, which actually the new Twin Peaks series also sort of did. But like over the credits, it just sort of like hangs on the last scene. So like whether it's somebody in like a big, warehouse, like where they're storing like files down these different aisles, and it's just like a guy like going through a box of like files quietly, like while the credits roll.
Yeah.
So somebody's sitting in their office and you just see them like continue to work quietly, which I don't know, just has this like unique take of like letting you sort of process the episode and what's happening. Like I said, there is sort of like a subtle cliffhanger in a lot of these.
Yeah.
So you're sort of like, it's kind of the documentary technique of like staying on the person you're interviewing for a little bit longer than you normally would, like cutting away right away. You sort of see what happens after the sort of response. But yeah, Sam Esmail, I think, does some really unique things. He actually directs a lot of the stuff he writes, the episodes, too. And so I think he's trying to do different things with the format. And the story is interesting. I mean, it's one of those shows where you sort of get caught up in just like a conversation between two people.
Yeah.
And it can be sort of like thrilling and suspenseful in of itself. But that's a one that I didn't want to forget to mention.
Oh, yeah. And I guess there's one other one which I have to mention, too, which is there's a new season of Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Oh,
yeah.
Is it the last season?
I mean...
I think they're ending it. But
well, then, so I he just got like... I think it's like the third season, because I watched season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then I just was on there the other day. I've been watching Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, finally into that one. Man, that's fantastic. I haven't seen that one. That woman can write, and those songs are amazing. And then it was just popped up. It was like, new season of Ash vs. Evil Dead. And I've watched a couple episodes, and it's funny. I mean, they, it's like a getting the band back together for one sort of big thing.
Yeah.
And it's, it's like, sprawling and all over the place like all the stuff is, but it's good. I mean, like, there's buckets of blood everywhere, and
I've seen most of the first season.
More creative, there's. I don't even remember what happens. Really.
Right. That's not.
But there's a lot of like cool stuff, and he's got a shotgun, and he gets a robotic hand at some point.
That show really goes for it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
goes all out.
Yeah.
Like
I watched
Bruce Campbell's great just to let him do that role.
Yeah, I mean, this is just put Bruce Campbell. I mean, there was he like finds he has a daughter, his daughter. And his apparently he was married once. He eloped, and his wife got killed by a crazy demon in a school that threw a symbol at her, and like she tried to stop it by putting up her hand, so it cut off all of her fingers, and then her fingers fell on the floor, and then her head slid off. And,
of course it did.
And there was like a giant, like they had like a school mascot that like got possessed by a deadite, and then it was like this giant like evil bunny kind of thing, reminiscent of Donnie Darko. Anyway, he started a like a hardware store and sex toy emporium in his hometown. I don't know. No one else does it to level 35 the way they do. So I find it fun. They can keep making them, and I'm gonna watch them all.
Yeah.
With a towel to wipe the blood off myself.
My last two things I want to mention is there's been some chatter about this original film on Netflix called The Perfection.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, you're talking about Ash vs. Evil Dead, has some pretty crazy violence in it. Pretty intense. But I don't know. I think it's sort of like either love it or hate it sort of thing. And for the reasons you're kind of talking about, that it just sort of like goes for everything and just wackiness, and it's got some really good twists, and it's kind of the sort of thing where like, yes, if you really think hard about it, logically it's probably not gonna make sense, but if you just sort of go with the experience of it, it's a pretty wild, fun ride. To be able to watch. Has some really unexpected moments, and very goes back to some older like De Palma movies, which I sort of enjoy. And sort of his wacky turn of events that happen, coincidences that happen and come together. So ultimately I appreciated it. I wouldn't pick it like my favorite film of the year, but I appreciate somebody working in that mode. And then one that I know a lot of people talked about on the year-end lists for last year was Burning.
Yeah.
And it popped up on Netflix. Finally caught up with it, and it's totally like all the praise people are giving it is totally worth it.
Worth the hype. You heard it here.
Yes, that's right. I would recommend people watch it. It's kind of a slow burn, called Burning, but it's a slow burn, and but really fascinating sort of character study. I don't know. It's really hard to classify the film, which I always appreciate that, and has some, I don't know, sort of like David Lynch moments, but I still wouldn't like. It's not a copying David Lynch by any means, but has
that like, what am I watching?
Yeah, and well, I talked about this with the new Twin Peaks series, but overall, I would say like as a series of moments, I was really caught up in those moments. Does it come together as a whole that I can understand what happened? No, but like. And I'm not saying Burning is that way as far as like it not necessarily to make sense as a whole, but like there are certain moments that are just so like beautiful and unexpected that really caught me off guard. Because it's kind of a minimal film overall. It also, one of those moments includes a Miles Davis song from a French film, an older French film, and he did sort of this improvised soundtrack for the film, and I had actually seen it, I think, as a reprint in the theater, Elevator to the Gallows, but I didn't remember the music being so good, so they used one of the song, which definitely, I think, now inspired the music for Twin Peaks, actually. So there is all these kind of
it sounds quite Lynchy
connections. Yeah. But
turns out to be some really lovely moments. One of the main characters, and he's a little bit of like, I guess maybe you call him the villain, is Glenn from The Walking Dead.
Oh.
And it's kind of fun to see him. He's a very like suave, cool guy in it. So it's kind of nice to see him play some different roles, because I think he's actually quite a good actor.
Yeah. I mean, he plays Keith in Voltron, yes.
Oh, really? In what?
In Voltron?
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I mean,
voice actor.
Voices.
Yeah.
So we like, he's forever embedded in our children's world because of his. He also, he's a voice actor in a number of medium and small time Netflix things.
Nice. Yeah.
Like Stretch Armstrong.
Right. So yeah, I can't recommend that movie enough. I think it's still, even though people recommend it, it's like a foreign film in a different language. So I think you might bypass that, but it's made me think a lot of things and feel a lot of things.
Thinks and feels.
So I would recommend that. Anything else you wanted to throw out? Kind of naming off things.
No, that's good. As we said earlier, we've been pretty busy lately with a lot of things. I mean, I guess I won't pass up the opportunity to talk. I've been watching Crazy Ex-Girlfriend because my friend Marcy, longtime listener, has been suggesting it to me for years. And if you haven't seen the show,
things about it,
it's fabulous. I mean, there's like 2 to 3 musical numbers every episode, which is great, and they're original and fantastic. It's kind of like a one-woman Flight of the Conchords kind of thing, but not quite as silly. She also, I think she's the writer, Rachel Bloom, has a really good sense of story arc. I mean, I think sometimes to the detriment of individual moments inside of it, but like in the big picture, like what happens in the middle point of season 1, what happens at the end of season 1. She had all those moments really worked out very well.
Yeah.
And as our characters move through those moments, it's really fun. But it's mainly it's the musicals, and the fun story, but also the musicals
part of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's some really interesting and innovative moments and songs in there. And pretty much everyone is super talented and yada, yada, yada. It's fabulous.
That's great, Yeah, I've heard lots of things for the last couple of years about that. Yeah. That are very good.
And, we already talked about Captain Marvel before, but my family recently watched it. We bought it on Amazon and watched it. And my wife loved it, and my kids have seen it now like 3, 4, 5 times. I don't know.
I'm currently in the middle of it.
But they
parents, I have to watch.
Yeah, they loved it. I love it. I can't really say enough about how much I like the movie. In particular, I really like the. It's towards the end of the film because I just went in and saw them. But it's like when Jude Law's character is like, "Come on, like, and fight me without your powers," and she just like blasts him into the mountain. I was like, "That's how that's supposed to happen."
Right.
Well done.
My wife was mentioning, isn't Jude Law the voice of Iron Man's computer?
Isn't that Paul Bettany?
Is it Paul Bettany?
I'm pretty sure.
But Paul Bettany is. Because he becomes Vision. Right?
Yeah, he becomes Vision.
Yeah. That's right. Just because in America it's a British voice, we think it's Jude Law. That's true. I'm excited to finish it. I heard somebody say that Brie Larson is kind of boring in the role, and I was like, she's pretty fun so far. I'm only halfway through, but I'm enjoying her.
I'm just going to say that most criticism of Captain Marvel is just sexist.
Yeah.
Also, like, I don't know. I'm just going to say, yeah. It's like people that don't like Michael Bolton, it's generally sexism. Not always. There's some legitimate, like, critiques of him, but it's mainly sexism. I mean, I don't know. What, like, that strikes me such the wrong way when people say that. Right. Because it's like, what?
You
like,
wouldn't say that about the man.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't say about the man, and like it's like what is it like? Why couldn't we vote for Hillary Clinton? There's just some reason. Like what reason is that? I don't know. I just
It's not presidential.
It's something. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't. Because also, I mean, if you think of other like superhero comparisons, like. Do you need to balance like the look and the character? I mean, she's a really interesting character, and one of the most lively and entertaining female lead
I think so.
in an action film, and certainly in one of these Marvel films. I mean, look at our other females. I mean, even like we cross over the sort of Avengers series, and you have Black Widow, who like she's super sad because she can't bear children, and she ends up dying, and it's like these are pretty classic misogynistic tropes.
Right.
And I think that they're much more conscious about that with Captain Marvel, and I think like she of all of the characters, I mean, because the main advantage of when the Kree and Skrull conflict comes to Earth is to like show how Earth is now actually part of, or starting to be part of, like a larger galactic conflict. Same thing happens in the story of Ben 10, which is a fabulous story as well, written by Man of Action. And I think Carol Danvers like draw to take care of the larger issues and to be the only superhero that is concerned about anything except Earth, honestly,
right,
really makes her character and her writing very interesting. I also think she's a cool character.
Yeah.
And I think she's an interesting female character to begin with in the story, and that she is like an arrogant Top Gun character who's female. And there's not a lot of of that kind of character in other films. So she is both this like boastful, brash character type. She is also a woman character type. And I think they balance those really well in the film in a way that is both, appropriate and interesting and evocative in its characterization of her in a women's role, and also really pays a lot of attention to the way in which she navigates her, like Top Gun role. Like that element of her character has some really interesting things it has to deal with. In particular, like transcending the petty concerns of not petty, but the small concerns of an Earth, and honestly seems to fully understand what it means to help this like lost race of people, and to understand that with great power comes great responsibility. And if you can fly in space and beat almost anything,
right,
that means you got some work to do.
Right.
And you need to go do it.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. So that's a good list of things for people to check out.
Super excited about a lot of stuff coming up. So there'll be a lot of stuff to talk about. When we Star Wars stuff, and I want to see the last How to Train Your Dragon movie.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen it yet.
Trailer made
for that to go on.
Trailer made me cry.
Trailer made you cry already?
Oh,
yeah. I'm pretty excited. We missed that in the theater. So and I'm excited. Keep a watch out for our new season and our new format a little bit of what we're doing there. And I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening.